we are. Um, Space for Questions podcast. The wonderful James Lambert has offered his time to speak with me today. Thank you so much, James.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Nick, for your time. Thank you.
And the question we've decided to look at today is, how can you find your superpower? And we really want to dig into all the different corners of this question. And when we review these questions, the way that we approach this isn't necessarily just to find an answer. It's to go on that journey of discovery that exploring all the different avenues takes you on. And I guess we're probably going to ask 50 to 100 more questions on top of that to get us working. And that's going to be a beautiful thing. And I think the reason, James, that I wanted to have this particular question with yourself is that I know in your journey of your life so far, you've come from two different kind of polar ends, polar opposites of the spectrum, where you were very much a man who lived very much in anger and found wonderful superpowers, then very powerful superpowers, then dark side powers, let's say. You had the red lightsaber, and then and then we fast forward to a man who embodies peace more than probably anybody I've ever met in my adult life, and you've got Yoda's green lightsaber. You know, you've found a whole new set of superpowers. So I really wanted to have this conversation with you because I think it gets, we've got a depth that we can explore here. So what does it mean to you? Let's start by doing this. What does it mean to you? What is a superpower to you?
Lovely place to start, Nick. And what's so interesting about that is it provides contrast in this world of seeming duality we live in, and we spoke about before. To give you some greater clarity and context, previously, when I was identifying with a particularly heavy masculine identity, one in which I was rather unhelpfully told that real men don't cry, and ridiculous notions of manning up, whatever that means, as if it's solely identifiable with the male sex only. Nonsense such as this. I was very identifying what I would have termed or deemed a superpower then was overt strength, being able to lift great weights, being able to manhandle foes and enemies with great ease, being able to literally punch and bulldoze my way through walls. However, as pleasing as that is to the ego, and let it not be misunderstood, in some instances, that was useful. Indeed, when being attacked, it is beneficial to have a degree of physical strength. However, what's interesting is that when you take that out of that given context, i.e. for 99.9% of the rest of my life, where overt strength was profoundly unhelpful, it was sorely lacking. And so what was then a superpower in one context, Nick, became my kryptonite in another. Interestingly, as I've evolved and I've come to realize what I identify currently with my superpower, apart from the gift of being able just to live and love, is such qualities such as empathy, kindness, compassion. These now are genuinely more than just paying lip service to them, at the very forefront of what I currently identify with being my superpowers today.
Beautiful. And do you know what? I sense something similar if I look at my own journey, because it was only sort of in the last 3 years that I've been walking a more enlightened path, let's say. And prior to that, it was very much in the city. I was doing the normal city guy thing, 3-piece suits, aggressive gym sessions for 2 hours before work, all that sort of stuff. And, I felt incredibly powerful at the time. But I realized that by comparison to the way I feel when I'm more in flow, I realized how much it was forced, and I realized how exhausting it was. But I had no frame of reference to compare it to any other way of being. So this was just the thing. And it's like you said, when people say man up, I would hear that, I'd hear that in my mind so much. If I get to a Friday and I'm exhausted and I'm thinking, it's Friday, I've got a whole weekend ahead, and already I'm dreading Monday. And I'd be like, you need to man up. You got responsibilities here. You need to be stronger here. And it's crazy. Like you say, you're throwing yourself through walls, and that only lasts so long. So I think that's interesting, isn't it? I think it's interesting how a superpower can actually it can be, you can have something else masquerading as a superpower, you know,
Yes,
inadvertent excessive force in
absolutely.
in our case.
Yes, no, you said something very lovely there about being exhausting for many of our, I think, as many of our listeners will know, for for every genuine superpower, which is something, as I've already alluded to, love or kindness, hiding behind that, if you like, the sleight of hand of the unhelpful nature of the ego is offering a shadow side or a shadow solution to said superpower. So it will entice one with its weaker brother or sister. So in the case of love, you could have lust. In the
Mm,
case of wanting to give to others, you will have care for only the self. And so, to give more context, what in a sales setting on the shop floor, when you're a superpower indeed, could be your overtly businesslike, authoritarian manner. Indeed, in that context, it could have won the sale. Now we come away from that, as indeed my overtly masculine type of behavior was useful in the ring or in the field or on the door when engaged in hostilities. However, when removed from that given context, which may at best take up 10% of our life, it's somewhat redundant. And yet, many of us plow on and talk to our partners as if we're closing a deal with
mhm,
the same, albeit unconscious, behaviors and traits. This is patently unhelpful. And alas, though, if we're stuck in this hamster wheel of constant, thought, feeling, repetition, and the behavior that yes is useful in a given, we can, let's leave it at it's unhelpful. And I
mm,
think we've both experienced that. And just quickly on that point, you mentioned masks. I also feel that at times this is the inauthentic side of a superhero. What I identify with this is very interesting because, as you know, I used to love graphic novels.
mm,
My particular superhero was Batman. And this is what's interesting. You see, his regular life, when he didn't wear the mask, Bruce Wayne, that was seemingly his true face. People knew him as Bruce Wayne. And yet, only when he adopted his mask, I believe, rather ironically, that was his
mm,
true self. So we must always also be careful sometimes, because I think hiding behind our shadow self is but our truest, most authentic self. So again, just to make that clear, when Bruce Wayne put on the mask and became Batman, although he was seemingly hiding, his real self came to the fore. So
mm,
what I offer me, you, our listeners, is that sometimes that part that is currently hiding, that is suppressed, that really is your truest, most highest, noblest self yearning to come to the fore. In my
mm,
case, I can only talk for me. I was, is, and always will be a loving, gentle, kind soul. And yet it wasn't always profitable or wise to let that come to the fore, no matter. That was my truest self, love, as it is all of us. But I hid. I wore a mask of snarling aggression. So the real self only could come out sometimes almost in jokes and banter, as many
mhm.
men do. But again, the point stands. I offer that sometimes the most authentic you, your truest, noblest self, is hiding. And yet, if you have the courage, nay, bravery to bring that to the fore, magic happens.
Yeah, I think this is an amazing point actually when we're talking about the different types of superpower. How really are you able to identify your superpower if you're not truly identified with yourself? Um, and I think that's a beautiful question. You know, I think it if it is needed to do this, it kind of increases the importance of that real, you know, identification with what you are and getting to know yourself. Um, and if I again look through my personal experience, which, as you rightly say, is all we have to go from, if I look through that and I see it was really, you know, when I was in my former mindset, let's call it, um, in a similar way to the way you felt, you know, like, because I feel my superpower is my ability to connect very quickly and very deeply with people. And this was with my former mindset, something that personally I, didn't really see as a superpower. Don't get me wrong. When I was a young man going out on nights out and chatting to girls and stuff, it was incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Made me quite popular amongst my group of friends.
Yes.
They would always send me in, if you know what I mean. And in
Yeah.
work, it then became profitable for me to do this, but I never really embraced it in such a way. And actually using it in those small ways then just created this conflict, because I was being my, kind of having a small expression of my truest self, and then coming back to not being able to fully identify with that.
Yes.
Which I think is really quite amazing. But this then pushes me into another area of thought in
Mm.
terms of, can you have more than one superpower? Um, which I think is interesting, because if I look at what's interesting when I've played with this is when I've looked through it, I've kind of identified a few different things that I think would fall into that category for me.
Yes.
But then what I do is I try to drill deeper into each one of these points, and they end up pointing down to the same thing.
Yes.
So they're all kind of just, variations of what is my core superpower, I think. But in your experience, I mean, how have you found that? Do you find that a superpower can be something quite nebulous, like an ability that you have, or almost like a behavioral trait or characteristic that you have about yourself, which then impacts a lot of other things? What have you found with that?
It's a lovely question. I think, first of all, I offer very humbly, but with great passion, nevertheless, increasingly in my life, everything is both subjective and objective. And so when we come to numbers, I just find myself pausing, even as I urge caution within myself. I don't, Bob Marley was, I forget the quote verbatim, but something like, money is numbers. And if your happiness depends on numbers, you're in trouble. And we
Mm,
do this with our weight, as if, oh, when I'm 12 stone, I'll be happy, but I'm 11, so I cannot be. What does that mean in this context? Whether you have 1, 12, 6, or 100 superpowers, what does it matter?
mm,
Embrace the totality, the sum totality of all that you have to give and to offer. And numbers be damned. And I say that so passionately because, as you say, it can become very nebulous, and some of them inevitably will overflow and intercollect and overlace and so on and so forth. I offer with deep sincerity, I think we need to get away from the numbers. So when I say, what is my main superpower? Again, is this an ego talking? And that's for all
mm,
of our listeners, and indeed me and you, to quietly answer for ourselves. I think it's more important to look at a given context, because then we can allow the truest superpower, of which I believe there are many, to come to the fore. So what does that mean with increasing greater clarity and context? That means if I'm listening to you, I allow my superpower of true, authentic listening to come to the fore, not listening with the intent to reply with a witty riposte, not to out intellectually jab you. No, to listen, and to do so by going all in.
mm,
Equally, when it's my time to talk, let's do so. Going through the gates of, is this truthful? Is this, or will it be of service? And is this kind? When it's time to love, to do so. When it's time to eat, and so on and so forth. But allow, all, as I say, and do not be limited, because another thing I do, we all do, is within this numbers thing, we we constrict ourselves, and the sum totality of what you are is absolutely, it's unstoppable. I often use that word because it is limitless. So the second you start going, what is my main, or what is my one superpower,
mm,
I think you're trying to limit that which is unlimitless. And
mm.
that's both terribly awe-inspiring, but also incredibly wonderful to contemplate also, Nick, I think.
I think that's an amazing, amazing point, and thank you for making it, because I think what we come to here is we come to the difference between a convergent and a divergent approach to things, rather than saying, where is my main? Let me focus on it, which is clearly something that I was being pulled towards doing, being open, because once we label ourselves as one thing, we limit our ability to be anything else, don't we? So,
Yes, yes.
um, so I think that's really beautifully put. And as with any wonderful statement or question, you're probably going to send me off onto a day or two's worth of We're
Oh, it's
flexible in
great.
that. So we may have to throw a part two together at some point. Who knows?
It's lovely. No, but Nick, this is what's so beautiful about the space you're holding, the Facebook page, a space and a time for questions. Because indeed, this what's so lovely in particular, and why I resonate so strongly currently, in particular with your mythology in this instance, you are literally asking questions without a a need to stumble upon a defined and definitive answer. And I find that so refreshing, indeed, particularly in the time where people don't, to my way of thinking, ask a question to truly hear the other person. It's almost just feedback for their own egoic validation. And as I
Mm,
say, there may be a time for this. There is a time to get a second opinion on an important business deal, a decision in your life. And yet, what's so lovely when you hold just a time and a space for questions without having we don't have to have a defined answer. Again, I use the word magic, but there is a beauty. There is a beauty within that. So,
mm.
yeah, very well done. It's a lovely thing.
Yeah, beautiful. And it really has been quite a joy to go through, just to kind of see the engagement come through. And what's really fun is asking questions where you completely have, you know, no idea or even interest in the answer. I find it kind of think is quite fun. But I think in talking what we're talking about here, this is, if we're talking about the number, and again, I completely agree with you. I think that kind of getting attached to that makes no sense. It limits your ability. It limits your ability to understand the great depths that you have, and have an opportunity to bring synergy between a multitude of different things.
Hmm.
um but from knowing what you've experienced a time in your life when you thought you'd really aligned with superpowers. Whether or not you'd have used that language said at the time is another thing, but you thought you had, and now you've aligned with a more pure, truer, love infused superpower. You realize that that was predominantly force. So having those two experiences, how would you say, or somebody who maybe hasn't aligned with their superpower, how do you know when you found your superpower?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I want to touch upon it. It's not that it was force. Again, given the particular context, it was truly authentic
Hmm.
because I wore a mask of anger, hate, loathing, and violence for so long. It became my identity. So, and I say that not to reestablish it in my own mind, but for somebody listening, it's like, how can we carry over? And we've spoken about this before, but for the listener, how can we carry over a particular mindset, feeling, or behavior from one field into another? So again, greater context, your skill set that you learn in the city of London itself, in a very, very busy and a toxic at times environment, there was a time when you thought that those skills learned were redundant when you were gravitating towards a different way of life. However, those skills were not redundant. The context just needed to be changed. So what does that mean? In my life, the same tenacity, experience, yes, but persistence and just absolute all in nature of the behaviors I had to typify when fighting and winning, they have proved to be tremendously useful as an entrepreneur, a coach, an author, and speaker. The context is given, but the mentality that drives it can be tremendously useful. So,
Mm.
and again, I say that because many of us, when changing, we almost leave, quite literally, the baby out with the bathwater. Because I thought, well, what, I don't want to be a fighter. So where does that leave me now as a man of peace? But a man of peace can still have the gravitas and the internal, the spirit is hard, if you like. That is forged of iron, not just the physicality of oneself and the
Mm.
muscles. So you see, it becomes truly, as I now see it, all of life as not being contradictory, but rather complementary. And this is
Mm.
again what I believe the yin yang symbol in part is alluding to in this world of duality. It's the symbiosis, it's the symbiotic nature of everything being interconnected at its best.
Mm.
At its best. You see, we can see things as increasingly we do in this world of Donald Trump wishing to build a wall, and I don't understand that. That's different. We see it as a contradictory. I don't understand that. That's of other. But if we can have an integrative mindset and see it as complementary, then you see we can get the best of both worlds quite literally. And so in the first part, that's really what I hope will provide some value with that. And with that being said, I think I've forgotten the second part of the question.
Do you know what? And thank you for because you know I framed one thing and then asked a question, and thank you for going for the frame first, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in everything you just said there, and I think in fact that may even prove to be one of the most powerful points that we have on this whole conversation. The fact that, you know, it's very easy to look at different times of our lives when perhaps we were not as enlightened, or whatever we want to say, as we are these days. And would be very easy to cast stones in that direction, but it would be completely naive.
It's very well said, Nick. And I'm so big on this point because I know I don't have to be psychic, because we are all interconnected, because I know how I have felt about integrating the past with the present, moreover, looking towards the future with great love. It has caused my soul great pain. So sometimes what we do is we don't, with our hopefully currently enlightened selves, we don't always look back with great through the lens of love. We don't look at our former self through the eyes of compassion, kindness. No, because what I do is I look at it at sometimes, if I'm being crucially honest, which I always try to be, is with loathing, is with guilt, is with shame. What kind of idiot would do that? This isn't helpful. You see, we often say, oh, if you knew better, you'd do better. But sometimes we were the same person, of course, but we were different. And I urge anyone that is struggling with that, oh, but you don't know what I did, and you don't know the shame I felt, and how can I possibly forgive myself? But you can, precisely because you are here today with another opportunity to wake and rise again, and to live and dream a new dream, and to practice what you know in action today. I think that's very valuable. And I think it's a gift we give ourselves. I'm still working on it, but I truly believe that forget others for just a moment, Nick, forgiving ourselves for not what we knew is very important. And moreover, it actually offers us a very nice foundation, a very solid platform to then go on and practice what we now are about. We walk the walk.
But this is what I was thinking as you were saying that. Then, you know, if you cast judgment on your former self, your younger self, for the things that you've done, then you almost remove your ability to listen to the lessons. That, you know, that what was I doing? I was an idiot, and nothing great came of that. Whatever. You know, you're not owning that period of time. And yeah, again, I see similar things. You know, more just kind of the way I was with people, my energy. You know, deep down, I think in the same as you had, there was always the heart telling me that there was some conflict here. But, you know, Western culture is so much so that, you know, you bury that deep down. That's not needed. And no one wants to see that. That's not pretty. But yeah, and I think if I look at my journey, my continued journey over these last 3 years, there's been a progressive state, like an evolution, if you will, where in which I have gone through a process of shedding certain layers, and certain layers that have been shed are layers of judgment against my former self for different things. And then which I've always held, and then as I've kind of got to a point, I've come to the realization that you've just shared. I thought, oh, why? You know, with the lessons I took from that, and while it wasn't pretty and it wasn't this, that, and the other, you know, I now know X, Y, and Z, or I knew X, Y, and Z because of that. So I think that it's a wonderful process, and it's interesting, isn't it? And to be able to go back and remove those layers, align more with yourself.
Yes, we've spoke about this before, Nick, but I truly do believe, I'm very passionate about mining for the gold that is there. That is there. It may be covered in layers and layers of god awful things and layers of shit. But if we just mine deep enough, there are some true gems. You know, I often say, turn one's wounds into wisdom. I'm a huge believer in that. And of course, moreover, in the microcosm, the macrocosm, if we were to go back and change one thing, well, we've completely altered the time frame, the timeline, Nate, of our very existence. So we won't
Mm,
have this conversation for one. We won't have the experience. You may not even meet the very partner you're in
mm,
love with.
mm.
Everything changes. So no, you can't have one without the other. So I've learned to look back on it with total acceptance, total openness and love, and to truly dig deep and mine for the gold.
Beautiful. So coming back to our question that we forgot, because we had this inspiring explosion of words, which truly was inspiring. Thank you. But it's, how do you know when you found your superpower? You know, how do you know when that's the case? Now, I'll start by throwing out a bit of a discovery I had recently on this, because I wrote something in the group of Space for Questions about finding your superpower, and for me it was always something that I was aware of in one way. You know, I was always good at chatting to girls on nights out. I was, you know, always good at making a friend with a client when I walked in for a business meeting, but didn't really take it much further than that. And really, for me, there are a couple of key processes that I had to go through. One of them was getting to know myself deeper,
Mm,
understanding what my true heart's wish is, to realize that it's perfectly intertwined with my superpower. Um, to, I guess, see it used out of one context, like you said earlier, you know, transferable skills.
yes.
Seeing that, you know, my years in sales helped me over the last 12 months with the filmmaking that we've been doing and the interviewing and everything else. And,
Yeah.
you know, something I didn't even know that I was practicing for, which is lovely
Yeah.
synchronicity. But I think the third one was really, and this may just be the fact that I had spent so much of my life oblivious to it, and the universe decided to send me a few more signs. But people kept telling me, this is an amazing power you have, this amazing power. And maybe, you know, I was just far too oblivious, or whatever it was, to see it, and I needed greater messages.
Yes.
But as soon as that kind of affirmation, support, or confirmation, or whatever you want to call it, came from those other people,
Mm,
it then felt to me like, oh no, this isn't just my ego. Because there was always a point where I thought, oh, you know, everyone's good at that sort of stuff. You know, it's just your ego talking. Calm down.
yeah.
You know, and
And
I'd get caught in this, and that's probably more a testament as to where I am in my journey right now. But that affirmation from other people allowed me, it was an invitation to accept it and step into it. And as soon as I did and started embracing it, I was like, wow, this feels amazing. You know, where have I been? Where have you been my whole life, kind of thing.
oh, that's
Um,
lovely. I like the way you put that, an invitation to
mm,
recognize that. And that is important, but just on that juncture, because there may be many people listening that may never get that validation from outside. And we'll only stay here a moment, and there's a certain gravitas there, because it is seemingly a lonely place to be in, but it's not, because again, we come back to the self. And as you say, there's a few things I've alluded to earlier in this conversation, how you can sift, if you like, between what is authentic and which is the shadow self. And that is what you're really, I was going to say feeling, but we must again be careful, because again, you could feel like things that are not truly for your higher self. Like, for example, of diet, we often talk about diet, but you might feel like eating just on a very superficial level, like a Big Mac, and maybe even more than one a day now, not just a week. But that feeling is very short-lived. So as you know, and that's the power of asking self-inquiry, not just powerful questions to another, but to oneself. What do I really want here? In your lovely forthcoming ebook, I think you're exploring this very same thing. What does the body need? What does my temple? Ask the adherents. What do they want? The trillions of cells. Now, if we begin to do that, certainly if you ask the question more than 10 times, you get past the conscious egoic self first of all,
mm,
and we get to what's real, again, what's authentic, backing up to nearer the seat of the soul, the Atman, if you like, the watcher, the consciousness that's sitting there. It doesn't need anything, for it is not
mm.
thirsty. It's not hungry. That's interesting, and that's a nice place to get to. So again, when we come to superpowers, it's first of all not recognizing that it's one, for it can be many, and truly is, I
Mm,
offer.
mm,
And it's looking deep into that. But again, just on that point I was saying at the start, if you haven't got anyone to tell you, and that it's looking at what most consistently, and I use that word very deliberately, consistently brings you joy, true
mm,
joy, moreover contentment. Again, this is important, because it's not a superficial, fleeting thing. Because many people, like, that they might like running once round the block, but to do it consistently, maybe not. Again, no judgment, because they may swim for hours. So again, it's finding what works best for you. And this is when the I is very important. You get to know the I when it is helpful and useful for you. That's not a selfish thing. And many of the times, this is what I've come to realize, Nick, particularly in self-improvement, development and spiritual circles, the ego has got a terrible rap. And I actually befriended the ego a long time ago because I saw it as an enemy. And when you do see something as an enemy, it will cause you problems. But rather like a passenger in the car, it might rabbit on a bit too much. But if I can befriend it, then we can converse as we're doing now, as opposed to the constant monkey mind chatter it was doing before. You're not good enough, you're this, or just banal talk. You can catch yourself when you're watching a TV, sometimes even when you're listening to someone else. There's all this other stuff going on, but that's not you. And again, in discovering your superpower, many of our friends listening, there will already be the chatter, even now, going on, oh, but you haven't got a superpower, you've got more than one, or did he say one? None of that's you. And I think that's a very important place, almost ironically, to start. That's not you. And the superpower can then come from what is more authentic. So again, if you haven't got that external validation, look at what you most consistently like to do. And moreover, if you have got good people around you, or even not so good, strangers, associates, if they're frequently telling you, you're funny, Nick, or you're an amazing communicator, allow that to seep through the first of the layer of, oh, don't be so silly, particularly that British reserve sometimes we're guilty of not accepting compliments, of which I've only of recent time got better at that. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I have a very similar relationship with my ego. And you and I have discussed this on many a warm evening in Tenerife, sitting there just kind of talking things out. And yeah, completely agree. The ego is allowed to come to the party. It's just not allowed to choose the music. Serves a wonderful role. And I think this is true about the different sides of your mind. And again, it's very interesting that you raised this again, because understanding that because it is a symbiotic relationship, the sides of your mind and your consciousness and the body and everything else, it's pure it's a symbiotic relationship. And in understanding that separation, in understanding that there are waves, but they are essentially still part of the ocean, it made the whole communication model far clearer, because it was the difference between going to a party with my eyes closed and not having any idea who I'm talking to taking the mask off and being like, oh, there you are, there you are, there you are. I know what we're all here to do.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important. And I love your advice about, follow what makes you happy, follow what you really want to do. And
I would use, increasingly I'm coming away, and this is, again, it shows my growth, because that word happiness, because there's nothing wrong with it, again, given the context, but many of us are searching for happiness, and I venture that why it's so elusive is it by its very nature, it is transitory. You can be happy with a new item of clothing, a new partner. We sometimes collect them like coats or handbags, a new car, watch, or holiday experience. However, that will, as time goes on in that sort of linear fashion, that it will become jaded with the passing of time. What I have deeply gone into, the width and the breadth of my being, is contentment. Now, this at first blush, and this is why it doesn't get as much coverage, I humbly offer, it's not as sexy. It's not, I want to be happy. I want to, again, particularly within the self-improvement or personal development communities, we want to be happy. Yeah, that's something I can get. I can grab it. I can feel that now. And yet, after the workshop, it could be a week or a month later. Where's that gone? But contentment, you can live in that. You can literally
Mm.
dwell and marinate luxuriously in contentment. Contentment from a good job well done consistently. Therefore, the contentment carries with me as I understand and understand my value structure. So when I begin to delve deep in them, happiness becomes sort of a redundant, distant cousin, because I'm content with how my life is. Now, lest it be misunderstood, does that mean I don't have any goals? Does that mean I don't work towards something and I'm driven? No, far from it. But you're not seeking to derive temporary happiness from something that otherwise you can have deep, rich contentment from. And
Mm.
this, I offer, is what we're really about in the busyness of living. It's contentment. It's contentment in how I live. It's I'm content whilst looking to add more to my life with what I have currently. I'm content with my body, how I look, and my current weight. Well, yes, still maybe working towards adding muscle or losing weight, whatever you see fit. But again, this is why I talk about the principles. The first step is so important. If we are building a foundation, or initially a beautiful skyscraper, which is the edifice of our life, if that's built on like a studio flats struct foundations, it's not going to last very long, my
Mm.
friend. So
Mm.
that's why I go, all of this is predicated from a temple of contentment. And from there, we can add fleeting moments of happiness, but we
Mm.
dwell and live in a state of being that is mired in contentment.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And so, so would you say in your view, in which case that when finding one's superpower, it's finding that activity or that task or that connection or whatever it may be by nature, that once doing it or once actively being involved in it, you just get a deep level of contentment, like the kind of thing of, I could do this every day for the rest of my life and I'd need nothing else. I'd be perfectly contented.
Yes and no. Yes, because that's a great way to live. I want to offer a completely maybe paradigm shifting thing for yourself, for me, and for our listeners.
Mm.
That the superpower you are seeking, is it my compassion? Is it my skill set? Is it my way with the ladies? Is it the superpower you are seeking is actually as close as your next breath. It's the heart that beats within you. What does
Mm.
that mean? It's your life. It's the opportunity to live and to love. From there, all of this can be added. Your superpower is your life that you have been given, my friend. That is the superpower you seek. The other things, if you like, are the Christmas decorations upon the
Mm.
tree that is the temple of your superpower. That is the edifice. You're looking
Mm.
here and there for, that's it. You can add all of these skill sets, but your superpower is your ability to live again for another day and therefore love. That's the real
Mm.
superpower I offer. So maybe not a question we were looking for, sorry, an answer even. And yet, as you were saying, we weren't truly looking for an
Mm.
answer. And so therefore we are free to discover what serves us and is the most profitable for our higher selves.
This is it. And I think it's this whole process is just about deeper understanding and getting to realizations or topics that we may not have got to without a kind of walking through a process like this. So that's really is beautiful. And I really resonate with that. As you said that the Christmas tree, the Christmas tree example that you gave made me feel a bit festive, if I'm being honest with you. But I enjoyed it. It made me feel good. You hit on a hot button there, so that was
I love it.
nice.
And that's because constantly, this is so beautiful because Christmas for me holds such special memories. Truly, when I was little, and yet I've come to now realize because I'm truthfully and authentically being me, every day is like Christmas because I get to
Mm,
love. And so
beautiful.
it's no longer, it's only for the holy or for the holidays. It's every day is holy and therefore a holiday because I'm alive. And it doesn't
Mm,
become a trite statement. It's because from a place of contentment and gratitude, I get to look out through the lens of love and great wonder and go, my word, I'm free to experience, to talk with you, to learn, to coach, to love, to see, to taste as if for the first time. So again,
mm,
when I drink my water, it's not, oh, I've had water before, the conscious, I know. truly savor the now. A conversation on the phone, instead of doing lots of things, oh, James, I've got to get things done. No, you can have a conversation, be there, go all in, and then continue with the email. When you're with your children, delight in their playful smiles. And then there's a time for work. There's a season for all things, lest we forget that. And that, your power of attention, they focus. It's a game. You're looking for a superpower. That is a superpower. For when you are truly present, nothing on earth can beat that. Nothing. That is a superpower of untold, fathomable depths. To be present in a world of bewildering distraction is extraordinary. And yet it's a gift we can give ourselves. All of us have the ability to do that by deliberately, mindfully bringing our attention to that which we truly say is important to ourselves. And we get to decide that, Nick, every moment of our day. We vote with our money, what we spend our money, what we don't, what we choose to watch on YouTube, what we choose to watch on satellite or not, who we talk to, who we don't, what I read, what I ingest in all the, mind, body and soul. It's wonderful, wonderful.
Beautiful. And look, I love it when somebody shares a new perspective on something with you, how it can kind of shift the landscape of the way you perceive things, and it's not to say that one replaces the other, it just enhances the other, which I think is amazing. So at the start of this call, I was kind of viewing superpowers in a certain way. And then just the way you put that was so beautiful. The next breath is the superpower, the ability to live another day because it allows you to love another day. I mean, that is beautiful. That's as beautiful a statement as I think I've ever heard. And it creates this very interesting understanding, which then feeds in and comes full circle to the yin yang we were talking about at the start of the call, which is in which you go through life living your superpower, being in the now and being able to express love, being the superpower that we're all gifted with. But then you get the accompanying powers, like Superman with his laser eye vision and whatever accompanying powers he had, which for different periods of your life may serve you very well. But these powers as well, we can see they evolve as they switch to be able to move into a different context.
Yes.
So it's like, those decorations on the tree, for example. We hang one decoration on the tree, which is maybe something my son Oliver made in school. Yeah. And then the next year he adds something else to it. It's slightly evolved and we decide we're going to put it at the top of the tree. So it serves a different role. And so I think that's really beautiful. I think that's a very cool way of seeing this. I think
well said, Nick. And excuse me for interrupting. And it's just from that point, because I think that's so valuable, because if we are too focused and they blindsided by looking or trying to extrapolate a particular skill set for an individual that is currently doesn't feel that they have that, it's unhelpful. Whereas what we can focus, can you breathe? Are you alive right now? Have you the ability to choose to be kind? Can you love? These are all within your remit. No matter your geographical location, no matter how flush or otherwise your bank account is, that's within your power. As Viktor Frankl, one of my great, I consider him a mentor from afar, reading his book a few years ago, that man's search for meaning had a profound impact on me. That the men, for those that don't know, well worth seeking out, A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. But this was a man that was incarcerated within a Nazi prisoner of war camp. And of course, everything was taken from him. When to eat, when to go to bed, his very liberty. And yet, what this man realized, changed my life profoundly in many ways, was that the ability to consciously choose to be kind to his captors, where other people hated them. And, he chose to be kind. They could take his life, but they couldn't make him be unkind to them or hate them. This was a big principle for me dealing in those worlds. Nobody, and this is what, again, I'm talking, I want to drill deep into choice. You have the power to choose. If everything else is taken away from you, as it was with Viktor Frankl, his ability to choose how to feel and to behave in the next moment was his and his alone. and he chose to love. And I think, by God, what a tremendous that is everything. That is in the microcosm, the macrocosm. It's the beginning, it's the alpha, the omega. Everything in between is almost mere noise. If you make your life about those two things, love at the beginning, love at the end, you're not going to go far wrong. That is a north star. It's a guiding light. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And the thing is, I think the real beauty of it is it lends itself to, as you say, something which is very, very accessible for every single person, which is, you know, kind of screams truth. You know, if it's something the Buddha taught us, is that enlightenment is something, and happiness and contentment and love is something that we all have by default. You know, we just have to accept it. And I think it's very beautiful. And I think it's almost like, and you know, I'm trying to encapsulate here, but it's almost like that realization is like that moment that you know, if we look into Star Wars, uh, it's like the moment that they become aware of the Force. The moment that you realize the superpower is being alive, living another day, and have a chance to love another day, is like that moment when, you know, Luke Skywalker realizes that he's, you know, he has that, or Rey in the newer films, you know, and
Yes.
then from there, from that realization, you realize you are a superhero. You realize you are a Jedi, and from that point, you can, you know, just observe and witness as your superpowers and special skills start to just show up and come through.
Yes, and that is so beautifully put. And of course, like that film of which we're both enormous fans of, there is a choice within this world of duality of which, if you like, master to serve. Some did use the Force for more nefarious reasons. And my best friend Yoda, he used them, he was an ambassador for good. And I love that particular thing when he's in the swamp, when lovely Luke is training with Yoda and he's trying to lift his the fighter, the part, you know, the machine out of the swamp. And it's so this one scene is like everything. If people could go back and watch that, about belief, true
Mm,
belief, and not focusing on the Maya, as they call it, the world of illusion, for that's not really there. They alluded to it again in The Matrix with that lovely scene where he goes, Keanu Reeves goes to that home, and the boy says that do not focus on the spoon, or do not try and
mm,
bend the spoon, for that is impossible. And so you're getting away from the world of material. And as I say,
mm.
this is my personal most excited, what I'm most excited about, Nick, because we talk about, you know, inner space and exploring that, but what about our inner space? And for me, as I say, that will take you a lifetime. It's unfathomable. Its depths know no bound. So
Yeah.
when we begin to like dwell in that, that's again another superpower. Mastering your mind. What an exciting potential to do.
Yeah, and look, we live in a really, really exciting time. You know, the people in the generations before us were exploring the Earth. The ones in the generations after us will explore space, and we get to explore the inner world, which is and lay the foundations for that. So it's really very beautiful. And I think this is very exciting because we opened this call talking about how to find your superpower, with the intention of, or not the intention of finding an actual answer, just seeing where it takes us. And I actually think that we've come around to a pretty fantastic answer on this, because I agree with you that the ability to breathe another breath and to live another day and to love another day is incredible. I mean, not only from what it does for yourself inside, you know, but you know, if that's the way you are, you impact everybody around you, and that ripple effect is amazing. And you only imagine a world coming from that space, a population coming from that space, everything would change almost overnight.
Yes.
Um, so I think I completely resonate with that being like a core foundational superpower that we all have, and to be able to, I think, get to a realization on this call, where in which just aligning with that,
Yeah.
living that as your truth,
Yeah.
that's the first step, and then from there, being open to what will be,
Yes.
is the way to find your superpowers. The
Yes.
collection of them that you have, I think, is pretty fantastic.
I agree, Nick. And I really want, because people may at first blush think, you know, with the intellect, you know, that that's rather a bit more. I want, but no. How can I, what if it's they want something, and this is the thing. What sometimes you think you want and what is best for you are two very
Mm,
different things. Again, that's why I very deliberately said that. Get past the first blush feelings. Oh, I feel like a Big Mac. If we can look at what's driving that need, what's driving, are you comfort eating? No judgment, but what's driving that? So what you think, no, I wanted that. The whole purpose of listening to this was I wanted to discover my superpower so I can go out and conquer the world in business.
mm,
And yet, your superpower, the choice of where to put your attention and the choice to be kind in every moment and each moment of your day, from that, everything can be added. Every
mm,
single skill set can be learned and added to that. But again, it's predicated and based upon the foundation of kindness. You can't go wrong. And these are
mm.
these are these are unfathomable truths, because like this is just it's foundational, and I keep going back to that for good reason, because yes, in other calls we can explore, as you will with your other guests, many tips, tools, strategies and techniques you can add. But and this is why, again, the first call kicking off with you, I want to get a foundational level, that if they are kind, if they appreciate the moment, if they are aware of mastering their mind to the extent that they get to focus and choose their next utterance, their next thought, that is their superpower. Everything else can be learned, gleaned, and polished. But yeah, be kind, be in the moment, be present, and know that you choose your attention.
James, I think you've just given us the absolute perfect conclusion statement for the call. You have just summarized that. I like to end any kind of conversation like this with a takeaway, and you encapsulated that like a master. So, so thank you.